The new Harry Potter show is quickly approaching, and I keep seeing the same question over and over again. Why is a remake necessary? Chris Columbus even commented on this after seeing leaked photos of Nick Frost as Hagrid, saying that the show isn't even trying to make anything new. Why remake it if you're just gonna copy the original? Well, today I'm gonna give you solid proof as to why the show isn't just exciting, but necessary. The Harry Potter fandom seems determined to hate the show no matter what, first worried HBO would warp the story, and now complaining that they're copying the movies too closely. But here's the thing, a remake of the original story is exactly what we need. Don't get me wrong, I love the films, but just look at the Goblet of Fire. 700 pages crammed into a movie that was forced to rewrite Harry's entire fourth year due to time constraints. My name is Gibby and welcome to Factor Fantasy, where today, instead of rambling for 20 minutes about my personal thoughts on the show, I'm gonna show you why a remake is necessary by revealing every single change the Sorcerer's Stone movie made to Harry himself. After all, one of the biggest fallacies is that the movies got everything right, because it turns out that there are over 70 changes just made to Harry in the first film alone. Outside of Harry, there are hundreds more, and if you're interested in learning about every single one of those, you can check out the playlist on my channel after you're done watching this video. My hope is that by the end, you'll have a newfound appreciation for what HBO is attempting, as this show has the potential to be exactly what fans need to actually relive every chapter of the story, instead of getting the warped SparkNotes version that we got in the original films. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right into our changes, which we're going to be covering across the four major categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. Starting with character, we only have two key changes regarding Harry's looks between the books and movies. First, Harry's scar is actually in the center of his forehead, not off to the side. And second, Harry's eyes are actually bright green in the books, not blue. A lot of you may already know this fun fact, but originally Daniel Radcliffe was meant to wear green contacts. But they irritated his eyes so much that Chris Columbus eventually just changed it to be blue eyes to match Radcliffe's natural eye color. Now moving on to timeline, there's a few more discrepancies than in our character category. First, there's a point early on in which Uncle Vernon threatens to lock Harry in the cupboard until Christmas, but in the book he only threatens a week. However, the second timeline change kind of piggybacks off this, as after the zoo incident, Harry gets put away under the stairs for weeks. He says in the books that it was the longest punishment he had ever received, and they didn't let him out until the summer holidays, which start at the end of July. This means that he was in the cupboard for about a month. In the movie, they jump straight from the zoo incident to Harry's first letter arriving, so we miss out on this entire punishment. The next timeline difference here regarding Harry is the fact that after he goes shopping in Diagon Alley, he goes back to the Dursleys for the month of August. In the movie, they show him going straight to King's Cross with Hagrid. But why? Well, the answer brings up yet another timeline discrepancy, which is Harry's birthday. In the book, his birthday is on July 31st, but in the movie, it seems like they moved his birthday to August 31st. And now, to wrap up our timeline differences, we have a few smaller changes that I'll expand upon in the plot section. So they might not make much sense right now, but trust me, it'll come full circle later on. First, the movie skips over Harry's entire first week of school. Second, Harry and Ron visit the Mirror of Erised the night after Harry discovers it, not the same night. And third, Harry's Christmas at Hogwarts is extremely condensed, whereas in the book, we learn about the full events of Christmas Day. Like I said, we'll cover that in the plot changes section, which is coming up soon. But to wrap up our first three categories, we need to take a look at our location changes. Similarly to our timeline category, some of these might not make much sense at the moment, but once we get to the plot changes, it'll all come together. First, Harry and Hagrid actually sleep in the hut in the middle of the ocean before setting out the next day. Second, after they do set out to Diagon Alley, they take a train on the London Underground. Third, because Harry's entire August is cut out, this also means that the Dursleys' home is removed from a decent chunk of the movie. Fourth, the movie cut out a key conversation that Harry, Ron, and Hermione have down by the lake next to Hogwarts. And finally, the fifth location change is that Harry has his first practice session for Quidditch on the actual Quidditch pitch, not just out on the front lawn of Hogwarts. Now I know it seems like we've covered a lot, but honestly, all of that was just scratching the surface. Now that we've revealed all the changes regarding our first three categories, we can finally get into the plot changes, and trust me, there's a lot of them. So in order to simplify things, let's go chapter by chapter and cover each removed or revised moment from the book that includes our one and only Harry Potter. To start, we actually skip right into the second chapter of the book, because if you didn't know, the entire first chapter is all about Vernon Dursley's day at work and the night that Harry arrived on his doorstep. So there are no Harry changes there. Moving into chapter 2 though, we have 4 key moments which were altered or just completely removed from the film. First, we read in the book about several magical incidents before Harry even learns he's a wizard. Things that, to him, are unexplainable, but to Vernon and Petunia are obvious. One time there's a bad haircut Aunt Petunia gives him that grows out immediately. There's an ugly sweater she wants him to wear that suddenly shrinks so small it can't fit him anymore, and there's an incident at school where Harry accidentally apparates onto the school roof after diving behind some trash cans when he was running away from Dudley and his friends. Obviously, all of these precursors to Harry's big reveal are completely omitted in the film. Next, in this chapter, there's a moment during their drive to the zoo in which Harry tells his uncle about a dream he was having in which he was riding on a flying motorcycle. Vernon nearly crashes when he hears this because, as we know, Harry did in fact ride on a flying motorcycle when he was a baby. But Vernon firmly tells him that the dream is ridiculous and there's no such thing as flying motorcycles. That's not the only dream moment that got removed though, as we also learn in this chapter about Harry dreaming of a bright green flash and a burning sensation on his scar. Of course, all of these dreams are omitted. And finally, the last removal in this chapter is a key moment in which we learn that Harry has to deal with people approaching him in public. Every time his aunt and uncle take him out, people in strange robes and hats would come up to him and shake his hand, thanking him for something that he doesn't even know about. He had no idea why people were so fond of approaching him, but of course we know that this is because he is famous in the wizarding world. How all of those wizards recognized him, I'm not really sure, but I'd guess it's because of his scar. Next, we actually skip over chapter 3 and move into chapter 4, as most of the changes in chapter 3 were addressed during our timeline section. So as for chapter 4, which is titled Keeper of the Keys, we have 3 seemingly small alterations that the movie makes. First, Harry doesn't actually draw a birthday cake in the dirt of the hut. He just lays down and watches Dudley's glowing watch until it hit midnight. Another small change is that Harry and Hagrid sleep in the hut on the sea that night, and they don't leave until the next morning. Which brings us to the third and final change of this chapter, as Harry wakes up the next morning and thinks that he had a dream the night before, until he looks on the couch and sees Hagrid laying there. An owl arrives with a copy of the Daily Prophet, and Hagrid is half asleep, so he tells Harry where to find money in his coat pockets and to pay the owl the fee for the paper. This is Harry's introduction into 2 crucial elements of the wizarding world: owls and wizarding money. But with chapter 4 wrapped up, we can move on to chapter 5, which is all about Harry's time in Diagon Alley with Hagrid as they shop for his school things. First up in this chapter, we have quite a significant moment which the movie cut, and that is Harry's first encounter with Draco Malfoy. That's right, they have an entire interaction in Madame Malkin's shop while they both get fit for robes. And if you've ever wondered why Harry turned down Draco's hand on the steps of Hogwarts, this is why. As they greet each other, Hagrid is outside the window, and Draco insults him by telling Harry that Hagrid is a drunk who sleeps in a hut outside Hogwarts. Harry immediately dislikes Draco for this comment, and he defends Hagrid. Draco in this moment doesn't know that he's speaking to Harry Potter, so he doesn't back down. There are also some other things said in this interaction that really put Harry off, but regardless, this moment is a key contributing factor as to why Harry doesn't accept Draco as a friend later on. Next in chapter 5, we have a few key changes to Harry's time in Ollivanders. For starters, Harry talks with Mr. Ollivander about his parents' wands and what they were good for. The wand maker replies that Lily's wand was good for charm work and James's wand was good for transfiguration, which goes well with what we learn about them later on in the books. Also, Mr. Ollivander goes right up to Harry and touches his scar, apologizing for selling the wand that did that to him. Next, another thing that got cut was the fact that Ollivander measures Harry's arm before finding him a wand. And lastly, when Harry officially finds his wand, red sparks shoot out of the end like a firework. The movie obviously changed this to be a glowing light that shines down on him when he holds it. And with that, the movie moves on to chapter 6, and so do our changes. In this next chapter, which is all about Harry's time in King's Cross and his journey on the Hogwarts Express, we have 5 differences to discuss. First up, how does Harry get to King's Cross? If you remember, Hagrid doesn't take him there because he goes back to the Dursleys for a month. So that means that the only person he can ask is his Uncle Vernon. Fortunately for Harry, Vernon is always eager for a chance to humiliate and torment young Harry. So once he hears that Harry needs to go to a platform 9 3/4, he jumps on the opportunity to take Harry and leave him there to search for a platform that doesn't exist. Sadly for Vernon, it does exist, and Harry does find his way there. How? The Weasleys, of course. And that brings us to the second omission of this chapter, as the movie left out a funny moment in which Harry eavesdrops on Fred and George as they try to tell their mom that they just met Harry Potter. Mrs. Weasley didn't recognize Harry when they helped him, so she thinks it's highly unlikely and that the twins are just making stuff up again. But obviously we see how that turned out. And that brings us to the next change, as Ron already knows who Harry is because of this interaction, although he still does ask to see the scar, just like in the movie. By the way, it's small moments like this that I hope the TV show can include. It just helps to round out our characters so much more and gives us a more intimate experience of what Harry is experiencing. Now moving on to the next change in this chapter, we have a more important piece of information that the movie omitted, and that is the writing on Dumbledore's chocolate frog card. In the book, Harry reads the back of the trading card, and we learn from it that Dumbledore had helped Nicholas Flamel with some of his work. Harry later uses this information to piece together the puzzle of the Philosopher's Stone. Of course, the movie cut this and gave the discovery to Hermione instead. And finally, the last thing we miss out on in this chapter is Harry's second encounter with Draco, who visits Ron and Harry's compartment along with his goons, Crabbe and Goyle. And you know how earlier I mentioned Harry declining Draco's hand in friendship on the stairs of Hogwarts? Well, that's actually wrong, because in the book, Draco offers his hand right here on the train. But of course, Harry declines it all the same. And with that, we can move on to Chapter 7, which is titled The Sorting Hat. Can you guess what it's about? That's right, it's all about Harry's first night at Hogwarts, and while there are loads of differences in general, there's only one small one that is specifically about Harry himself. If you're wanting to learn about all of the changes, check out my series Movies vs. Manuscripts. But anyway, the one change in this chapter regarding Harry specifically is the omission of Harry's dream that first night at school. He dreams that he is wearing Quirrell's turban, which kept talking to him and telling him to transfer to Slytherin. Then he also sees Malfoy laughing at him. It's a weird dream, but as you can tell, it's mixed with some truth and some lies. Obviously, J.K. Rowling was teasing Harry's connection to Voldemort all the way back in this first book. Anyway, let's move into Chapter 8, which has two key changes and is all about Harry's first class with Professor Snape. First, during the class, Harry is actually intently listening and watching Snape along with the rest of the class. He isn't taking notes like the movie shows. And by the way, who takes notes like this? I don't understand his reasoning for only putting a couple of words per line. You're gonna run out of paper so fast. But anyway, the second change with this class is the fact that Harry talks back to Snape. That's right, Harry's got some sass, and he tells Snape to ask Hermione, who obviously knows the answer to all of his questions. You see, the whole time that Snape had been questioning Harry, Hermione had been raising her hand as high as possible. This snarky comment from Harry gets a laugh out of the class, but it leaves a bitter taste in Snape's mouth which lasts for years. Now moving on to Chapter 9, we have one of the most exciting moments that the movie chose to remove for some crazy reason. This chapter is titled The Midnight Duel, and it tells us all about how Draco tries to get Harry expelled by tricking him into an illegal duel after curfew. There's a lot more to this that I can't get into right now, so again, this is a great episode to go check out in my series, because I'll dive into all the details a lot more. For today though, there are three key differences regarding Harry that I want to address. First, Harry tells Ron about getting on the Quidditch team when they're at dinner. Ron freaks out because in the book, there's a rule that first years aren't allowed brooms at school. So by Harry being on the team, McGonagall is making quite the exception for him. The second difference is the omission of Draco's challenging Harry to a wizard's duel. You see, earlier in the chapter, Harry had his first flying lesson, which earned him a spot on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. But Draco didn't know that yet because the last thing he saw was McGonagall taking Harry off the field. So he came up to him during dinner and asked if Harry got expelled. Harry tells him no and then calls Draco out for being a coward, saying that he only acts tough because Crabbe and Goyle are there. Draco then says he'd take Harry anytime in a wizard's duel and says to meet him at midnight in the trophy room. Ron agrees to this on behalf of Harry, who has no idea what a wizard's duel is. But Ron explains what'll happen and Harry and him plan on being there. Which brings us to the final change of Chapter 9, which is not only the omission of Harry going to this duel, but also the alteration of how the trio really found Fluffy the three-headed dog. What happens in the book is that Ron, Harry, Hermione, and Neville all end up going to the trophy room at midnight, and they find out that Draco has set them up, and there's no duel happening. Draco had snitched on them and told Filch that some students would be out of bed at midnight, so when they get to the trophy room, they have to hide from Filch. They then all try to run away and end up in the forbidden third-floor corridor, and in the exact room where Fluffy is kept. Obviously, this is drastically different from the movie, which just shows the main trio encountering Fluffy, and not because of any sort of midnight duel. Unfortunately, just as things are getting interesting here, we've run out of time. I wasn't planning on making this 2 parts, but this ended up being way more changes than I expected. So I hope you enjoyed part 1 of every change made to Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And in a couple of weeks, I'll be back with part 2 to finish off all the changes. As always, thank you to Jason, Joshua, and the rest of my incredible Patreon supporters who make these videos possible every month. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay in the loop for part 2, and check out my Movies vs. Manuscript series, which currently has us in the Goblet of Fire. And finally, as a closing thought for part 1 of these changes, I hope you have a new perspective on the beloved original movie series. I love it, but it isn't without its faults. So to look at the upcoming HBO show with overly critical eyes is a bit hypocritical when the original movies got so much wrong. And trust me, in part 2, things get a little crazy as the plot picks up and Harry comes face to face with Voldemort. But until then, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.